There was an afternoon when you sat on the floor of your childhood. The sun came through the curtains in golden slices. You drew with crayons, without thinking about perfect lines. Your small hands created worlds that only you understood. At that moment, you were entirely you. The air carried the smell of biscuits baking. Your grandmother hummed a song you didn't know the name of. You existed without explanation, without justification. Your laughter was as spontaneous as summer rain. There was no audience to impress. You ran barefoot through the wet grass. The rough texture of the concrete beneath your feet. The wind ruffled your hair and you didn't care. There was a wild freedom in the air you breathed. You were a pure, unedited creature. In those days, you didn't realize that you were being watched. That your every gesture was being measured, weighed, judged. That someone was taking mental notes on who you should be. That your natural preferences were just drafts. That your original version would need corrections. Now you wake up and check your reflection in the mirror. But it's not your face you're looking for. It's the approval of voices that live in your head. Voices that whisper about how you should look. About who you should become. You choose clothes that aren't yours. You use words borrowed from people you admire. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You agree with opinions that make your stomach turn. You've become an actor rehearsing for a life that isn't yours. The world is louder than before. Millions of screens shout about who you should be. Influencers sell you improved versions of yourself. Every scroll is a new pressure, a new expectation. You get lost in the noise of external voices. Your social networks are museums of who you pretend to be. Photos calculated to generate admiration. Captions written to please invisible algorithms. You bow before metrics that mean nothing. You collect likes as if they were oxygen. You've learned to translate your feelings. To convert your joy into palatable formats. Your sadness must have acceptable reasons. Your passions must pass through the filter of someone else's approval. You've become a translator of your own soul. At school, you discovered that being different hurts. That standing out is dangerous, that being unique is lonely. You started molding your conteas to fit in. Dimming your light so as not to disturb. Becoming an echo of external expectations. Your parents whispered dreams that weren't yours. Professions that sounded safe in their worried mouths. You swallowed these expectations like bitter medicine. You believed that to love was to obey, that to respect was to disappear. You confused approval with love. The education system taught you to color inside the lines. To memorize answers that others considered right. Your creativity was pruned like unruly grass. Your questions were silenced like noise. You learned that conformity was synonymous with success. At work, you wear a professional mask. You smile when you should, agree when you would question. Your ideas are filtered through fear of rejection. You become who they need you to be. Your authenticity is locked away in a drawer. You date people your friends would approve of. You choose partners based on how they make you look. Your relationships are performances for invisible audiences. You love with other people's rules engraved on your chest. Your intimacy becomes a product for external consumption. Your decisions go through the mental committee. What would my mom say? What would my mates think? How would it make me look on Instagram? You've outsourced your internal compass. You live a life by proxy. You buy things you don't need. To impress people who don't care. Your possessions become statements about who you want to appear to be. You confuse having with being. You accumulate objects as proof of value. There's a deep fatigue growing inside you. The fatigue of maintaining different personas for different audiences. Of remembering which version of yourself to use for each occasion. Of repressing natural impulses that don't fit the script. You're exhausted from not being you. At night, when the curtains close, and the masks can finally rest, you feel a strange emptiness, a sense of being lost. As if you'd spent the whole day speaking a foreign language. As if you'd forgotten your real name. You look in the mirror and don't fully recognize it. The face you look back at seems familiar, but distant. Like a faded photo of someone you met a long time ago. There are layers of expectations covering their natural features. You wonder where the child who drew without fear went. Relationships have become transactions. You give them what they want, you get approval in return. Conditional love disguised as acceptance. You dance to the tune that others choose. You forget that you had your own melody. There are rare moments when the mask slips. When you laugh too loudly, or cry without permission. When your real opinions slip out unfiltered. In those moments, you get a taste of freedom. A reminder of who you used to be. But then you correct yourself, apologize. You go back to the approved script, the safe version. You've learned that authenticity is a dangerous luxury. That being real is risky, vulnerable, potentially rejected. So you go back to representation. The world sells happiness in standardized formats. Success measured by universal metrics. As if everyone should want the same things. As if there were only one right way to live. You swallow these formulas as absolute truths. Your ambitions have become loans. Dreams financed by the approval of others. You pursue goals that make sense to them. You climb mountains that others have pointed to. You forget to look where your heart truly points. Society whispers about normality, about fitting in, about not making waves, about being productive, efficient, palatable. You internalize these voices as wisdom. You confuse conformity with maturity. You develop a borrowed body language. Gestures you've seen in people you admire. Postures that convey approved messages. Even the way you walk has been edited. You move through the world as an imitation of yourself. There's a peculiar loneliness about it. The loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't know you. Who love the edited version, not the original. You become intimate with strangers who live in your skin. Isolated within your own life. You start to question your own tastes. Do you really like it, or have you learned to like it? Have your preferences been influenced, or are they authentic? You get lost in the difference between conditioning and choice. Between what is yours and what has been implanted. Social networks have become deformed mirrors. Every post is a test of approval. You measure your worth by virtual reactions. Your self-esteem fluctuates according to digital engagement. You outsource your validation to algorithms. There's a child inside you who still remembers. Who still knows the difference between genuine and performative. That still feels the texture of truth. This child whispers protests that you learn to ignore. But it never completely stops talking. You develop anxiety in authentic situations. Moments that demand spontaneous, unrehearsed responses. Your heart races when it needs to be real. You've forgotten how to navigate without a script. Improvisation has become foreign territory. Your relationships become shallow. Protected by layers of acceptable personas. You avoid depth for fear of discovery. Of them seeing through the performance. That they realize you no longer know who you are. Time passes and you notice a pattern. How your personality adapts to the environment. How you become who they need you to be. An emotional chameleon, always changing colors. Losing track of the original color. There's a growing weariness in this dance. Of remembering which version to use with whom. Of maintaining consistency between different characters. Repressing impulses that don't fit the role. You're exhausted from being a full-time actor. You start to miss something. Something you can't exactly name. A feeling of always being away from home. Even when you're literally at home. As if you'd lost the keys to your soul. There's a silence that you avoid. Moments without distraction where you could listen to your inner voice. You fill the empty spaces with noise. With activities that prevent you from thinking. With bureaucracies that save you from introspection. But sometimes, in the middle of the night. When the world is quiet and the masks are asleep. You feel a distant echo of who you used to be. A familiar melody you thought you'd forgotten. A reminder that there is still something untouched inside you. The truth is that you've never really changed. You just covered yourself in layers of expectations. Like a sculpture wrapped in cloths. The original work is still there, intact. Waiting to be discovered again. Its essence hasn't been lost, just buried. Under years of should, must, have to. Under the weight of pleasing, fitting in, surviving. But she resists, like seeds under concrete. Looking for cracks to sprout. You don't need to become someone new. You just need to remember who you've always been. Unearth the child who drew without fear, who laughed without calculating the effect, who existed without asking permission. The journey back doesn't require heroism, just small acts of honesty, moments where you choose truth over approval, where you listen to your voice amidst the chorus of expectations, where you take a deep breath and remove one layer at a time. You don't have to tell the world when you decide to be real. You don't have to make announcements about authenticity. You can simply start choosing differently, speaking your truth in homeopathic doses, existing a little more every day. There's a wild force waiting inside you, an energy that doesn't need approval to exist, that doesn't bow down to metrics or algorithms, that knows its worth without consulting outside opinions. This force is you, before any editing. The world can resist your authenticity. It may question you, criticize you, try to mold you back. But there is something more powerful than the opinions of others. The feeling of finally being at home, of recognizing your own reflection. You don't have to be huge to matter. You don't need to wow crowds or break records. Your importance isn't measured by applause. It's measured by the honesty with which you inhabit your life, by the courage to be small and true. There is a silent revolution waiting, not in the streets, but in the small moments. When you choose your music over other people's playlists, when you speak your mind without editing out of fear, when you choose to be real instead of being accepted. Freedom doesn't lie in conquering the world. It's in stopping trying to be conquered by it. Remembering that you are not a project to be corrected, that your original version wasn't a draft. It was the masterpiece. There is a deep stillness waiting for you, a place where there is no audience to impress, where you can rest from the performance, where your natural breathing is music enough, where you can simply be. You don't have to be perfect to be valuable. You don't need to fit in to belong. Your strangeness is your signature, not a defect. Your peculiarities are marks of authenticity. Your difference is your gift to the world. The invitation is always open, to come home to yourself, to remember the child you protect, to listen to the voice that was never really silent, to be who you always were again. You don't need to be huge to awaken. You just need to be present to your own life, to pay attention to what is truly yours. Choose authenticity over acceptance. Remember that your soul doesn't need editing. The world will keep offering masks, whispering about who you should be. But there is an older, wiser voice, one that knows your real name, that calls you home, always. You just need to be awake enough to listen.